self-awareness is really what produces results as a leader. The reality of it is, Vinay, we're as leaders, we take the responsibility to lead people. I don't know about you, but to me, that is probably one of the biggest responsibilities in the world.
Welcome to the next episode of Business Blind Spots Exposed, the podcast. Click the subscribe button and follow us. Listening. Hi there. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another podcast episode of Business Blind Spots Exposed. We have some really exciting guests today. And there's a couple of things I'd like to start out with. Number one is to tell you what the Business Blind Spots podcast is actually all about. Honestly, it really started with me. I had a lot of blind spots. I like to say I have one more blind spot than everyone else in the world. But what's really important is the podcast today is all about the fact that we all have blind spots. Number two, the way we can see those blind spots is through others' perspective. At least we can be made aware of it. And number three is once you start to be aware of what those blind spots are, you can use the data in your business to monitor it and fix and just watch those blind spots all the time. And that's why we do this podcast. Let me tell you about some of the events that we've got coming up in a couple of weeks, and then I'd love to really jump into it. We've got a really exciting talk scheduled for today. In a couple of days, we've got Mike Englert, who's going to be talking about building a repeatable and scalable sales engine using data. Scott Steckel is going to be talking about the past, the present, and the future of pest control, and a look at the numbers. We've got Richard Moore coming up on sales tips from Richard Moore and using data to create and craft better behaviors. And then today we've got Sherri and Lou McManus to talk about how to think bigger with data. Really exciting conversation. Throughout the course of this, we have a chat, and you are more than welcome throughout the course of this to say, hey, I got a question, ask for greater clarification. But why don't you start out first with anyone who's online or live with us? Tell us where you're from. Just type it into the chat. With that said, Sherri, Lou, how are you all doing today?
Doing great. And thanks for having us on. It's been exciting working with you and working up to this moment. So thank you for having us. We're excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you all too. I was spending a little bit of time over the last couple of days looking at your website at the Lou Everett group, and I saw the empowerment training sort of module or coursework that you all have. Maybe let's start there. Tell me a little bit about what that's all about and your general philosophy in terms of helping business owners, and what do you all do?
Thank you for asking. I appreciate that. Well, first you want to let them know what we all do, and then I'll get into the empowerment method there, the empowerment training. Does that work for you?
Sure.
All right.
So we are the Lou Everett Group. I'm Sherri. This is Lou Everett. We are a married couple. Most people question that, but we are.
We survived.
We survived. And we are certified executive leadership and personal development coaches and corporate trainers. What we love to do is that we really focus on leadership development and effective communication for small businesses. And how we do that is that we provide direct strategies to help build leaders from within, as well as to prevent toxic work cultures. I, for one, should know we lived through an ICU and a burn center for 10 days due to a toxic work culture. And we also provide compliance training such as diversity and inclusion. So our passion is really transforming today's leaders through coaching, training, and educating.
And that kind of brings us right down to the empowerment program that we offer. Really, it's a system. And it's a system that we have that's proprietary to us, that we've taken our 4.5 decades of experience and training combined and use that. And our failures, as you mentioned before, the blind spots, right? We've always had them. Everyone has them, and we have to learn through those. Sometimes it's a challenging process because we have things get in the way, like ego, right? Things like that. And so we developed this system, this particular system called empowerment. It starts with an M and spells out empowerment, 10 letters. And each one of those letters represents a principle that each one of us as successful leaders must follow. in order to really lead with influence. And so that really is what the kind of the root of it is. As a matter of fact, we have a webinar series coming up that hits each one of those. We have five webinars that hit each one of those. But I'll just throw out the first one. It starts with M, right? Empowerment starts with the M, how we spell it out. And that first one is me, the me principle, because it all starts with you, right? Matter of fact, it ends with you too as a leader. So that's a little bit about the empowerment system, but we take and we utilize that also in how we coach and how we train and how we get people from where they are now, where they intend to be, by utilizing those principles and how it is that we train and we coach.
So this is really interesting as a place to start. Starting with the me, and I think the word you used, not the word you used, you mentioned this idea of ego. Gosh, that creates so many blind spots. At least for me, it's created so many blind spots. I couldn't see my way out of a box because I was like, oh, I'm not in a box, because that's what I believe. Well, and actually, I just noticed I've got a number of people who've chimed in here. We've got someone from Bangalore, India. We've got RDP, North Carolina, and we've got Raleigh, North Carolina. So thank you all for chiming in. And throughout the course of this, would love to shape this conversation by anyone in the just put something in the comments or in the chat and ask questions and just tell us where you're from. So I appreciate you all doing that. So getting back to the ego, I tell people I'm probably pretty good at seeing the stuff that's right in front of me. I can see a little stuff that's a little bit in my periphery, but the stuff that's behind me, it's really the stuff that's the most dangerous because I have no idea what that is.
Yeah.
That's the blind spot, the stuff that's behind you in business and life. Talk to me about that. When you all come into organizations, you're helping people up-level their thinking, think bigger, think in a grander way, starting with them. What are some of the blind spots that you see with some of these leaders in business? What pops up for you?
Yeah.
Well, there are several. And just like you mentioned, and sometimes it truly is behind us. That's why we can't see it. But here's the fact of the matter is usually we're right in the middle of it. And we can't see it because we're so involved. There's a story, a client of ours. We call our clients partners, and a partner of ours. So I was working with him, and he told me the story of camping. He went camping with friends, and he'd never been camping before, never really dealt with camping. But thought he's gonna kind of live outside the box a little bit, try something new. And so he said, okay, sure, I'm gonna go camping. I'll abbreviate the story for you here, but so he says, oh, you know what? At first, he wasn't going to go because he had a lot to do, but he says, you know what? I want to try something new. But he didn't have any gear. So he get in his car, and he, on his way down to camp, he says, I'll just stop somewhere and grab me some gear. And he pulls into a Walmart parking lot and calls up his friend and says, hey, listen, I'm stopping here at the parking lot to pick up some gear. I'll be there shortly. And his friend's like, oh, don't worry about it. We have a Bass Pro Shop or whatever it is over here near us. And he says, oh, okay, cool. So he takes off and he keeps going, and he arrives and realizes that there is no Bass Pro Shop there. His friend had made an error, and he looked at his GPS and says, all right, well, where can I get some gear? And it brings him right back to that Walmart, and ended up having just a sleeping bag. And so that night he's out there in a sleeping bag only, no tent. And we all know when it gets cold out at night, right? And the wind is just howling. And at one point that wind was picking up, and he bundled up in his sleeping bag. He couldn't sleep because it was cold, and the wind was just billowing right from where his neck is all the way down. It's freezing. And he dealt with this for hours. Finally, like 4 a.m. in the morning, he says, I'm just going to get up. I'm not going to deal with this anymore. So he gets out of his sleeping bag. He looks down and says, man, what if I should have just turned the sleeping bag the other direction so that the wind was going that other direction, so it wasn't going inside my sleeping bag. You see, that's what happens in our blind spots, isn't it? Because we're so into it, we can't see it. We've got to step outside.
Too busy in the picture.
Yeah.
Need to step out.
Yeah. But to answer your question, specific blind spots that many people see, especially at the leadership level, is what is it that you are doing or not doing that is changing the situation that you're in? Like, what is it that, and the way we work with our partners is we ask them questions that help them pull out of the picture, come out of the situation, so they can look at it from this perspective. And when you do that, all of a sudden, like you mentioned, Vinay, and you talk about this all the time, your blind spots become clear. It's like, how come I didn't think about this? Right? We've all had those awakening moments. Why didn't I think about this? And it's because we needed to step out and remove some of these other things like ego, and which is that the fifth principle in the empowerment system, and look back to me. What am I doing? What am I not doing? But those blind spots, a lot of times, that's why toxic environments exist. That's why cultures that are negative cultures exist, because when we reach a certain level of leadership, sometimes we then believe that we don't have anywhere else to go. We've reached the epitome of what a leader is in position, and I don't really have to grow anymore. And then we become unaware of really what's happening.
So this is, gosh, first of all, were you watching when I went camping when I was 19?
Interesting, isn't it?
I think that may have been me. But the funny thing is, as I have started to go through this process of building, I'm on my sixth company at this point in time. I stepped up to the plate and I kind of point over the fence and I said, "This one's going over the wall." And what I've stumbled across is the stuff that I thought I knew because I've been doing it for 20 years. Of course I know this stuff. Right. Is the things that I made the biggest mistakes on, because I know that stuff. My background is in artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analysis. That's easy peasy stuff for me. And that's where I've made the simplest mistakes, because things have changed. The context has changed, and I couldn't see it because the sentence always started with, "I know because I'd been there before." So it sounds like what I'm hearing from you is a lot of times trying to get people to just step back from where they were and say, instead of leaning with "I know," maybe just asking the right question first is more important. Am I hearing that right?
I agree.
Right. And we actually say that a lot when we do teachings and we talk on our topics that we do. We flat out say, people are like, "Listen, this isn't anything that you haven't heard before. The question is, how well are you doing it?" And that is where that stepping back at that moment to say, "Okay, yeah, I have heard of it, but I haven't, or maybe I should." It's coming into the whole should conversation and the self-talk. And that's the big key.
Yeah. Big difference between hearing about it and doing it, and how doing it well. I'm seeing in chat, Dr. Merrick said something really cool there. We never are neutral, right? And we recognize, I like that, recognizing the context that we're acting from. Because that self-awareness is really what produces results as a leader. The reality of it is, Vinay, we're as leaders, we take the responsibility to lead people. I don't know about you, but to me, that is probably one of the biggest responsibilities in the world.
Indeed it is. And I agree, Dr. Merrick, you are absolutely right. And the greater, so thanks for typing that in, the greater awareness of where we're operating from makes all the difference in the world. And I've read plenty of things, seen things, started to realize myself that my role is not actually to have, those people don't work for me, I work for them. Right. My job is to create leaders out of them, because if I get leaders out of them, they're constantly telling me what's happening from their perspective, which is a better perspective than where I'm standing from necessarily, right? Because they understand some things. So I tell my kids, I have young kids, 11, 10, and 7. I tell them, look, I could be the smartest guy in the world. I know I'm not. I could be the smartest guy in the world standing at the bottom of the valley, but the man or the woman who's standing on the top of the mountain actually knows it's raining before me. It doesn't matter how smart I am, right? It's all about perspective and what you can see, because they can see over the 6 mountains. I can't from the bottom of the valley. So I think this is kind of what you're saying here, and what Dr. Merrick has said in the chat here. Right. Depends where you're standing, right?
It absolutely does depend on where you're standing. Yeah. And it's it's being aware of, like, I love what you said there, Vinay, it's really truly, as a leader, it's about them, it's not about us. And that's where the challenge comes in, because here's the reality, okay? There's a bottom line. We have to, as leaders, we have to be responsible for the bottom line. That is our job, right? That is another responsibility, the bottom line of the company. We can't ignore that. Now, I would love to spend my days being that positive influence and motivational to my team all the time only, but we have to be concerned about the bottom line because that's our responsibility. But here's the difference. We're responsible for the bottom line. We're responsible to drive our teams to accomplish that mission. We don't have to trickle down that pressure in a way that causes our teams to do it because they have to, not because they want to. If you've been a successful leader, you know that when you have a team of people that truly want to follow you and really you got them on board with the mission, that bottom line is going to be accomplished without even thinking.
Yeah.
Because they're doing it because they want to. When you have somebody come to you and say, no, I really love working for you or with you, I love working with you as my leader, I really it makes me want to work. That's when you know that you're leading with a positive influence.
Agreed. And hey, Dominic, you're in here, and thanks for jumping in the chat. I think we all know Dominic. Hey, Dominic, how you doing?
Hey, Dominic.
And also to Lotama from Bangalore. Thanks for chiming in. We also have Marie Brewer, who I think we're scheduled to talk to Marie in a couple of days here. Thanks for chiming in as well. I appreciate all the chats and the comments. Please keep chiming in. I'd love to hear it. It's interesting. I actually just submitted something for a TED Talk as a way to lead to what I call fourth dimension leadership. And in that talk, one of the things I say is that I think so many organizations are focused on this profit. Profit is the bottom line, but they talk about employees being the most important thing in their company. Well, how do you measure your employees? Because on that spreadsheet at the end of every month, you've got numbers, your profitability, your productivity numbers, but that's about numbers. That's not about people. If you're truly concerned about people and scaling your organization, doing better for your customers and for your employees, where's the numbers for your employees? How do you feel about that? How does that sit with you?
It's extremely important, because we think about numbers all the time in business. And numbers are extremely important, right?
And it's tangible. That's why I think because, the playbook that was written back in the 1950s, and we say this often because it needs to be dead and buried. There's a new playbook, and we're writing it as we speak. Right. and it's people before profit. It's always been here. It just now has got this tipping point with the way that the world is now, and people are speaking up, and they're not tolerating, something that used to work some odd years ago.
That we're still using today. On some level, right? There's some companies that are still utilizing these old methodologies. And even worse yet, there's some that say they love their employees and they want to focus on their employees, but then really behind the scenes, the culture doesn't display that. But you're right, though. The numbers are important when it comes down to what your employees are thinking.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that. So part of what I put into that application was just this idea that profit is if you have, I'm throwing all my sayings here. I always tell people I can hire people for their minds, but if I get their hearts, I win. And if I start to think of profit as the primary directive or motive in terms of what I'm doing with a company, that's all I can ever achieve is just the scope of that. But if I start to think in terms of my employees and how my employees, I lift them up, then profit becomes just a byproduct that comes along for the ride.
Absolutely.
How does that fit with you all and what you all do?
Well, that's exactly. We believe that 100%, right? That result of profit is the result. It's like the after effect of successful leadership, right? That's where it leads anymore. We're done with the whole, hey, here's a here's a bow. I'm not going to give you the arrow. Go figure it out yourself. Kind of a mentality. We've got to truly develop people so that they look at us and say, man, that is the best experience I've had. Now we all fail. Like, don't get me wrong. Okay, I have done terrible in my past when I led in leadership. I've learned hard lessons in my leadership roles over the years, and it is those lessons that I think sometimes when we get to a certain level in leadership, we tend to ignore. We know it. It picks at us. It's that little It just taps on us in the back of our head. And we just tend to ignore it until things blow up. And then we say, oh, we need help. But then what kind of help do you really want is the question. You know?
Hey, I'm going to change the view here because it seems like you guys are minimized down in the corner here, and I might have this in a different.
Oh, there we go.
That might be a better format there.
There you go.
Super. Sorry about that.
All right.
That's probably what everyone else is saying. Dr. Merrick said profit can be seen as a measure of successful relationships, and that's a very interesting way to put it, right? If you can start to see the profit, that's the end product of those relationships being successful, and it's a good lens with which to look at those. Daniel Romero says employees want to feel appreciated. They need a leader that is bold, courageous, and seeks feedback from their staff on job expectations, and also being collaborative and win their confidence through clarity and support. Mm-hmm. How does that resonate with you all? What do you, Daniel Romero just made a comment there. How does that sit with the way you all think?
Mm-hmm.
That is a big part of our strategy and what we think.
Right.
And I'll add to what Daniel says there, because I think that's the awareness there is necessary, right? But I'm going to add something else in there. Be okay as a leader. Employees also want a leader that will say when they're wrong. Hey, listen, you're right. I was wrong. And people don't hear that enough from their leaders today.
Yeah,
because we will be wrong. And when you're people that you're leading, and you can connect with them, again, it's about connecting. It's about that relationship. And that part of that connecting is to be okay with, man, you're right. I was wrong on that. And then they say, well, they're people like me. And that's what really connects you with them, right? You kind of, even though you have to lead your team, it takes out that positional style leadership piece, right? And that breeds respect. You don't have to force people to respect you if you respect them.
You don't have to know all the answers.
You don't have to, right? Yeah.
That's another thing where ego has to be stepped aside, because we have this, thinking that as leaders that we have to know all the answers. And I fell into that trap too early in my career. I just thought I needed to know all the answers, but it got harder and harder when I didn't really rely on my resources, or, hey, you know what? That's a good question. Let me get back with you on that. And let me ask my resources so I can get back with you. But then here's the thing. Then that is part one. But then part two, actually follow through on that.
Yeah.
That's when you gain the respect from your team. It's like, oh, you actually heard me and you actually did something about it.
Right.
That speaks volumes. Unfortunately, we get busy, and I get that, but those are excuses. To be honest, as a leader, this is our burden, and it's also rewarding at the same time. And that's why not everybody can be a leader, and that's okay. We need people to help the bigger scheme and to get to that bigger goal, whatever it may be as a team. So it's something to think about.
I agree. So here's the problem with me on these podcasts is my mind is always going at 1,000 miles an hour, and there's like 14 different threads I heard in that whole conversation. But I got to keep myself focused here, right? I want to talk about data for a little bit and kind of how I think of data, and I'd love to hear about you all. I think of data as being an unbiased perspective on what's happening. It's the ground truth, right? Data doesn't tell you right or wrong. It just simply tells you what is. It's unbiased, right? It's objective.
Right.
As a leader, if I can't see data, my perspective is always going to be clouded potentially by my ego. The opportunity with data is to say, all right, I'm pushing my ego to a side. What is actually happening here? How does that sit with you all? With the people that you work with? How does that resonate?
Well, it's extremely important that we have, as leaders, we have the right data. And we got to make sure we distinguish the difference, though, right? The data helps to understand our productivity, but the productivity challenges we might face if we get the data back, like, man, we need a lot of work here. That helps us know, okay, we need a lot of work on the productivity. Now the next step is where, and make sure we direct our energies in those areas that the data is showing, right? And Vinay, you're an expert in this, where you're able to see where that data really does add value, because it shows, hey, this is where your productivity can change. And then it's up to the leaders to really identify, okay, how am I going to do that? The challenge, just as a thought, right? What I've seen challenging over the years is leaders take some data, whatever the data might be, and they'll say, well, that's the employee's fault.
Yeah.
We got to change that employee. That's the problem, right? And that's really not the case. And I'm sure you can agree with that. Because the reality of it is that data shows us where our weak points are, where our productivity weak points are, and our strengths are. But if the employee is not being productive, well, it all comes back down to that first letter in empowerment. It's about you as a leader. Always starts with you and ends with you. And so as long as we use that data effectively, it surely could guide us in the direction of making positive change and adjustments.
So Daniel chimed in here and said, a good leader is one that employees want to emulate and bond with them through effective communication and follow through. I think, Daniel, what I'm hearing here, and I want to circle back to this data in a second here, but I think what I'm hearing Daniel say is, look, the coach of the Buccaneers or the Patriots is not trying to go throw the football and make the plays, rather try to lead them to the path where they can throw the football and make the plays. And that shouldn't be a month after the Super Bowl actually occurred. It should be right then and there, be able to give them audibles, if you will, right? So that they can actually, a good leader is a coach, not the player. Am I saying that right, Lou, Sherri?
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything like you mentioned. It's not just the right decision. It's the right decision at the right time. You can make the right decision at the wrong time too, and it's not effective. But yes, a leader needs to wear multiple hats.
Oh.
We're talking coach, sometimes mentor, and then we also may have to do some, because the reality of it is being a leader is messy. Because if you're focused on leading people, right? We're talking about people getting into the people business. People don't look at leadership as being in the people business, and it is. It's just as important, in my opinion, as going into social work. You're working with people. The most challenging, complex being on the planet. And we have we have chosen and accepted the role as a leader. So it's extremely imperative that if we don't grow us first as a leader to identify what can we do to help empower people, we're doing it wrong. So something to think about there.
Yeah. So kind of dovetailing back into that conversation around data. I mean, for myself personally, I've fallen into the trap where I've looked at the data from my business as purely the answer, when in fact that's exactly the opposite. It's an opportunity to ask the right question. Right. I mean, if we look at a number 5, and I ask my employee, why do we get to 5? And I also have my own ideas of why we got to 5. And we arrive at the same answer or the same question. Well, that's a good thing to be, right? There's an alignment. But if they say we got to 5 because we painted it orange, and I say we got to 5 because of something else, and I don't know, the analogy might be breaking down a little bit here.
I get it.
But the idea is, if we have alignment between what I'm thinking and what's someone I'm working alongside of, the technician and the manager, if we have alignment, that data is the opportunity to make sure that there is that alignment. How does that sit with you all? Because it's all about alignment between management and the employees, is it not?
Yeah, and it's important. And again, we got to keep in mind the alignment view is very different from the front line, than the leader, right? We look at alignment very differently than, say, our team employees might. We have a different responsibility, and it's true, we've got to have that aligned, but the way in which we do that is really the crux, right? How do we communicate that to our team? We've got the data. We may even have, as a great leader, realized we know where the weak points are. You know what? Okay, I've got this manager that's fairly new. You know what? I probably didn't equip him well enough. I kind of brought him in quick, and whatever we identify that challenge is, it's up to us to provide that solution. And that's what creates that's what fills that gap and creates that alignment.
Yeah.
Is if we can identify those things, understand that the people have everything to do with that data. Without people, you don't have data.
That's right. I tell people we're all in the people business. You could be in construction, you could be manufacturing, you could be in technology.
Yeah.
But you know what? I still haven't seen any dogs and robots buy anything, right? It's still people, right? If you're going to create value, it's the people that have to create and consume that value. So we're all in the people business.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Talk to me more about blind spots. You come into companies, you come into organizations, you've got senior leaders that, look, that ego is in the way. How do you How do you help those leaders? I mean, ego is a really, really dangerous thing. I know it has been for myself for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get them to step away from that, step up that level, kind of build that broader view? What are the exercises? What are the ways that you get them to step away from that ego?
It's all about awareness.
Okay.
So it begins with them, and it comes down to understanding what it is that they're wanting to accomplish. Where are you now? We always start with anybody we work with. We start with where are you now, and where do you intend to be? Like truly, where do you see yourself? What is your ultimate vision? What is your ultimate mission here? And when they begin to siphon through the questions that we go through, we have a session that we do called the history of your future. And the history of your future can pull out all of those things. Is the ego in the way? Is it more of a I'm not equipped, I'm a brand new leader kind of thing, whatever it is? And it pulls out just by asking questions. And as you pull that out, and when you begin to talk and you say something that to you, have you ever done that before where you say something like, did I just say that? That sounded terrible. Well, right? We all have. And so when you can say it, and we work with somebody and they say it, and they realize, I never thought about that, and I just said that, right? Because that awareness is what opens up the door now for growth. Without the awareness, growth doesn't happen, right? We've got to be aware that we need that growth, that we have these blind spots, but sometimes we can say, oh yeah, I'm not perfect. I make a lot of mistakes as a leader. I hear this all the time. Well, that's great. Well, what are you doing about those mistakes?
Well, what are you learning?
What are you learning?
Yeah. And that goes to the mistakes and failures. There's a negative connotation to that. And honestly, you have to do a couple things. And this is where the self-talk, helps and to be aware and the perspective of what we're talking about is to really find out in yourself and you're like, well, wait a minute, what can I do differently? What did I learn from it? Take the good from it. And of course you could look back, oh, I won't do that again. Great. Well, then you just learned. And then on new prospects or new opportunities, or maybe building new leaders, don't take the negative and bring that to new opportunities. That's horrible.
You're repeating the same mistake.
Yeah,
right?
You're repeating the same mistake. Unless you're not learning from it, then that's a whole different ballgame. If you notice in anything in your personal life, in your business life, it all trickles through. Have you ever wondered that, it seems like you kept going the same mistake over and over and over again?
Why is this happening again?
Why is this happening again?
If you say the word again,
Yeah.
that means you've got to go back to find out, okay, if you implemented a solution that you thought was right, it didn't work. So it's the awareness piece, and we can become fully aware as a leader of who we are, where we want to be, why are we a leader, what is our main focus as a leader, what do I want to accomplish as a leader, and fully understand that those people that you lead are highly valuable, and by appreciating them as people and remembering that it's about them, not about you, it can change your perspective. You then can see the things that you're doing that's not working, and then take full responsibility for them.
I heard a really interesting statistic, and whether you agree with the numbers or not, I think it's the order of magnitude that really matters here. Is that it said that the average human mind has 80,000 thoughts a day. Oh, okay, is it 80,000? Is it 8,800? That kind of doesn't matter. But it says out of those 80,000 thoughts, 60,000 of them are exactly the same from the day before. Gosh, you're kind of doomed. I mean, doomed might be the wrong word here, but you're kind of going to repeat yourself if 3/4 of the thoughts that you had from yesterday are the same as today. You're going to repeat that process again. So ever since I heard that statistic again, whether it's 80,000 or 800, for me it's probably about 8 a day. That's all I can do.
Yeah, I'm with you, Vinay.
In those number of thoughts, what am I changing every single day? I mean, I talk to my kids about this. What have you found today that is no longer useful to you today, so that tomorrow you've made space for something new? I think that's what I'm hearing from you is people approach personal as well as their company life, their corporate life, professional life. They've got to start to understand, all right, there's some patterns in what I'm doing. How am I changing the pattern? Is that right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If we like you taught your children there is today, every day we as leaders have to say, am I better today than I was yesterday? Because it all starts with you as a leader. If we're not becoming better, we can't expect our team to become better. We just can't expect that to happen.
And it's limiting, right? The law of the
Right.
lid.
The law of the lid.
The
You're
law of the
limiting
lid.
yourself.
Right. You can only
and your
go
team.
and grow your team as much as you are.
Right.
And again, it's the awareness, and that's why it's so good to even have a coach or a mentor or whoever you feel comfortable with,
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay. I want to preface it. It's okay to have more than one coach.
Yeah.
So, some people have this notion of like, well, I have one coach and I'm good. And I'm like, okay, we have 5.
Yeah.
And we're proud to say that because it's all different aspects. And
Right.
you can actually look at that as any great athlete. They didn't become great because they just had one coach,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's something, again, another point making is the fact that you have to keep growing and you're only limited to where you are.
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
That's why you got to stretch and keep growing. And then you're going to see that growth. You're going to see going back to data, you're going to see the relationships, you're going to see the profit,
data will change.
And the data will change.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an ongoing and being conscious about it, being intentional. And it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. We get into these ruts, we get into the comfort zone. I mean, we can go on and on about that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's true. We get comfortable, we like routine, but then you gotta get yourself out of that. There's that.
It's what you do with that data that makes the difference.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's how you approach it.
Yeah, so this is really, really interesting stuff here, and we've got a number of comments here. Thank you, everyone. Daniel Romero has a thought here about data is subjective. Agree. I understand that it can be sometimes garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
Dr. Merrick saying a strong vision can help with the metrics of alignment too. I mean, if you don't know what the end point is, how can you figure out where you're going?
That's right.
I talk to my kids all the time about Disneyland. How do you know how to make the first left or right turn unless you know what the destination is? Because you could be going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Rocky says most people ignore the data or don't understand how to read it.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it so hard for people? Why? I mean, this all makes sense to me.
That sounds like what a lot of leaders say, right?
Doing it sounds fantastic.
Right.
Why is it so hard?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's again, we expect as leaders sometimes we expect our people to just understand where we're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And data, we know how important data is, and when we get that data and we're able to understand that data, okay, depending on and we need people to help us understand data sometimes, even as leaders, okay, depending on what it is that we lead. And when we understand that data, how do we then reinterpret that back to our team? How do we reinterpret that back to our frontline? Because they need to know about the data too. But at what point, at what level do they need to know about the data? It's just explaining. So it's, again, you're taking what you know, your responsibility as a leader, keeping it your responsibility, but also relaying that to your team in a way that actually connects with them, keeps you united, if you will, right? That one voice and aligned. Those are terms we probably have all heard. Well, at the same time, you're not saying, have you seen this data? I'll tell you how many times in my career in leadership have I seen where here I am sitting, doing emails like we all do as leaders. We're just sitting there, like machines, okay? Because that's what we do. We're driving a team. And so emails come through. They give you a screenshot of some data analysis results. And you're like, okay, what the heck is this? And then it's like, well, that says this, that says that. So make sure your team does it. Come on, this is everyone knows what I'm talking about here, right? This is not new. And so we get driven from top down hierarchical style leadership sometimes. And then what we do is, because of that pressure, we just turn around and follow that example, and we drive the team that way. When we realize, well, wait a second, a real leader is going to sit back and say, all right, I don't think that approach is going to work. So what can I do to really help my team understand what this means, and how can I get them driven? How can I drive them to really accomplish the bottom line, but wanting to, right? Wanting to follow me on this mission, not because they have to, right?
Right. So I like this thread here because we have a mutual friend, Tracy Phillips. And Tracy and I have had a couple conversations, and one of the conversations that the word that she just, as soon as she used it, I was like, all right, a bit flipped in my head. You can tell I'm a data guy. I talk in terms of bits. Well,
I got IT background. I talk a lot about network bits too, so I'm with you, man.
but she said, look, when you see something that, whether it's happy or you're disappointed in the thing, don't go to them and say, hey, look here, look at this, work 40% harder, right? I want you to start working harder to get this number up. She said, so hold on a second, invite them, say, so this is what I'm seeing is happening here. And I don't know if that's a good outcome that we want. How can we shift from where we are to where we want to go? Because this is where I'm thinking we got to go. Do you understand why I'm saying that? Do you see that? Oh, boss, yeah, I hadn't considered that's what you were trying to do and where we're trying to go.
Yeah.
Can we make these couple of tweaks? Isn't that exactly what you want your employees doing? Coming to you and saying, hey, look, here's how we turn the knobs and the dials to get higher productivity, because I can make a choice in what I do on a daily basis to get us there, now that I understand where we're going. So it's about that transparency and inviting them into where that journey or the outcome is supposed to be. And I think that's
and actually,
I love it. Yeah, that's
and
great.
actually bring the team into their ideas and have them thinking. Again, it goes back to, as a leader, you don't have to have all the answers, and to have the equipping and empowering your team is such a key thing. Again, harder said than done, but what you just said in that example
is empowerment. That's empowering them.
Hey, look at this. What can we do as a team to get over
truly
here?
Listen to it. Yeah.
What can we come up with, guys, girls? What's going on? Like, I'm not gonna spout out things because it may not be the right answer or right solution. Let's come up and brainstorm some solutions. That way they feel as a bigger power. The empowerment is so key, and that's what people really want. And that's something that we have seen in our working with our partners and working with companies that we have worked in early in our careers. That's what people want. They want to be part of the bigger picture. So why not give that?
And you'll be amazed on the solutions they come up with.
All right.
They're like, well, that's a great idea.
That.
Let's give it a try. I mean, what do you have to lose?
Right.
And then the next thing you know, you try it, and it's like, well, that really worked.
Right.
And so it's being open to understand that you have a team for a reason, because you can't do it all by yourself. So what you say is exactly right. Invite them into the picture. At the level that's necessary to say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Are you seeing something different? What do you think? How can we get to where we are now to where we want to be? And really listen to that.
Yeah. I want to encourage people. We've had a lot of people joining in via the chat. Thanks so much. I appreciate you all helping us shape kind of where this conversation is. I'd love to hear questions that are coming up for you, or lessons learned for you, or perspectives that you have. I'd love that. So please type those into the chat. I always like to think in terms of kind of take-home messages, right? To me, it makes some sense, and I've tried to invest in this myself and trying to ask and invite my company and my team to join into the conversation and tell me what they see it, how they see it from their perspective. I think that shift it's taken me a long time. If everyone else will take 5 years doing it, I've probably taken 25 years to figure it out. I am usually the dullest knife in the drawer is what I've always found. But what if someone wanted to say, all right, I love what I'm hearing here. I want to make this shift. Give me 2 or 3 steps. Give me 2 or 3 things that people could focus on today, right? They could jot this down and they could start. What would you give them as advice to starting today? Where would they start?
Well, the first thing is to ask yourself questions, right? So number one, the first thing you want to do is that, again, the awareness is a big piece. And if you're like, I really think I need something like this, I really think I need to kind of make adjustments. So that's the awareness piece. Now, the question is, how can I? So you write this down. Everyone's listening. Number one, how can I?
How can I?
Because the how can I is right. It defeats of instead of saying how can I. So we can then you identify after that how can I answer that question. Well, I can watch more of Vinay's podcast. I can connect with the Lou Everett group or connect with others that might be able to assist me. I don't know who to go to. Okay, well then resources that you can reach out to. So number one, how can I? Number two, how can I serve? So how can I? and the how can I serve. Okay, the how can I serve piece opens up a whole different picture. How can I serve? So how can I get the move on to the direction I need to get the help that I need, or the direction, or to read, or to study, or whatever. How can I serve? That's a big question, because I want to add a word on the end of that. How can I serve? But then how can I serve without my ego? Removing the ego, removing the fact that, okay, I'm a leader, I'm in position, and whatever the case may be. How can I serve without an ego? The third question, I'll give you one more. How far can I go? How far can I go? And we're talking about growth here. How far can I go? We're going to put an R and a W in there, right? Grow. How far can I grow? So you take a look at, I use nature a lot when it comes down to growth, right? I mean, you look at take an apple tree as a great example, right? You get this little seed. Say you're planting yourself, or a farmer plants an apple tree. It's got these seeds. Now here's the thing about that seed, that apple tree, that fully grown tree with all the apples and the branches and the leaves and the roots are already in this seed. What needs to be done now is it needs to be planted and nurtured. It needs soil. It needs water. It needs sunlight. It needs some darkness. It needs all of those things for it to really fully bloom and take a solid root. So then why is it that we look at ourselves as a leader and say, I'm good, I'm where I'm supposed to be, or we bring on a new leader and do not provide that type of growth, but expect them to. And then when that data comes up that they're not doing a great job, we let them go because they didn't accomplish the mission, even though they weren't equipped to do so. You see, growth is a big part of this. So how far can you grow? It's going to take resources. It's going to take other people. It's going to take you releasing the old and bringing in the new. It's part of that growth process. You've got to shed, just like that apple tree is going to do in the winter and in the fall. It's going to shed the old, bring in the new. See, we're all from nature. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Okay, we are people, and we grow the same way. I mean, once in a while, it might look like I have a leaf growing out of my forehead, but it's really not a leaf. It's truly, you get my point here, right? It's that growth piece of it, and everything grows that way.
And it's the pruning, right?
It is.
It's the pruning. That's right. Maria said releasing your ego. That's what we've been talking about too. I mean, again, it's a quick analogy with the plants. We gotta, in order to have, especially roses, I found this out recently. I didn't realize that you actually need to cut down some of those branches.
Yeah, like all the way down.
All the way down.
Right above them.
In order for the new season, so they can actually grow and prosper something new. And I didn't realize that. I was just like, well, it's just kind of growing. But it was growing, but very little sprouts. But as soon as you trim those, wow, there was so much blossom that came out. So if you look at that for us, what do I need to shed? What do I need to prune back, cut back? What do I need to cut out of my life that's giving a negative feeling, negative energy, however you want to interpret that, so you can have the new and have those new opportunities that you never thought possible. But if you keep holding on to that old stuff, it's on that hamster wheel. You're just going to get the same stuff, same data, same results every time.
And even if you get great results, your data comes back like, wow, these guys are doing great, and you get props from your direct report. It's like, I can't believe you're doing an amazing job. I'm so glad you're in. And you sit back and you go home at night, right? And you're like, I know that he's happy with these results, but I also know my team is miserable. Why am I getting complaints? Why my team is why do they not trust me? Why are they not, the why nots? Well, the results, because they're forced results, you end up, then your attrition rate goes crazy, and then all of a sudden you're not retaining your employees and you wonder why your big players are leaving. It also comes back around to leadership, comes right back around to it and how you use that data.
Yeah, it's. I think I may have learned a couple of things in the course of our podcast here. Well, I guess that's the point, right?
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad that worked out that way. Our job's done.
My wife will be happy that I was quiet for 38 seconds. That's amazing, Vinay. The thing that's popping up in my head, and to Marie's point about releasing your ego. It's not that the ego is bad, right? So much as the ego is just one set of sunglasses that you wear, right? And you see the world in a particular way with that ego. It's not that the sunglasses are bad so much as you have dark colored sunglasses. Well, you will not see a rosy colored world if you have dark sunglasses. And it's not that either one is right or wrong. It's not. I mean, that's what I'm getting from you. It's not that it's right or wrong, just another perspective on the world. And releasing the ego is not about do away with it altogether. Rather, just consider that there's other perspectives looking at the world. Right? Is that right?
Yeah, that's the perspective. It's about putting it in the right place. Putting it in the right place. It's like instead of eating dessert before dinner all the time, or eating dessert at all for that matter, right? You have a balance in perspective. Same thing goes with that. Like ego has a perspective. It has a place. And it's always used to hear it say, keep your ego in check.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what it is. It's more of that perspective. Releasing the ego, in other words, not holding on to it for dear life. And I'll tell you, I believe that the reason is that we tend to do that, that some leaders will tend to hold on to that ego, even though they don't admit that that's the ego, but they're holding on to it. And that's that weird stuck feeling that you have as a leader. That's your ego. And so the reason that we hold on to that is because that's what we've been conditioned to do.
Well, they identify it.
And identify with it.
They really identify with it, which is a whole nother.
Don't know where to go with it. I mean, your examples did the same thing. Your mentors did the same thing. And so you're like, you've never really been fully equipped. You're going to hold on to that. Now I'm a vice president, so everyone has to listen to me, right? That kind of stuff. And because your leader may have been that way with you, right? So you're right. I love it. I love that perspective.
Dr. Merrick sums it up and says, learning, growing can only take place if we don't already know it all. Right? You got to make space. You got to make space for the other perspective.
You have to. Yeah, we don't know what we don't know, right?
Yeah, and being open to it, right? So we're getting close to the top of the close of the show, this episode. I want to talk to you all about something that I've been working on. It's very important for me, and love to hear your perspective on it. Something I expect to be launching here shortly. I call it the 10 Million Intentions Project. And the idea is that I believe that something that has bothered me ever since I was, I was a kid, probably even more heightened as I started to work. I talk to so many people and I ask them, what do you do? And I get what a terrible place to be. Right? Where most of your waking hours are spent in a place and you just don't like it at all. Right? So the whole idea of the 10 Million Intentions Project is to help 10 million people live intentionally. Right?
Yeah, I love it.
Being able to find their place and find their path to align their why with the company that they're working with. Why, right? If you can have that alignment there, gosh, someone told me a long time ago, if you love to kick stones, find someone to pay you to kick stones and you don't work a day in your life. Right? So I created a stone kicking company.
That's right.
so that I can do that. How does that resonate with you? Building those 10 million intentions, does that align with what you all do as well?
I love that.
Yeah, it certainly does.
I love that.
We teach in being intentional.
We teach it a lot, and aligning
living.
your purpose and your why with what it is that you do in life. Many of us, if we sat down, and here's the question, here's the thing, and I love that whole concept, and because when we can draw attention to intentionality, that's what brings happiness. When we really are intentional about where we should be, but we have to understand something there, right, Vinay? Like you said, your why and your purpose. Like what what is that?
Mhm.
We tend to, over time as adults, we become conditioned. As a child, I mean, so what do you want to be? I'm gonna be a fireman. You already know what you want to do because you love fire trucks or whatever it is. You know what I mean? But then we become conditioned over years, like, okay, I'm going to work.
Yeah.
Even the word is work.
Yeah.
And so we tend to just get calloused. But happiness is not. We don't ever look at it that way. But you're right. We can take and align ourselves with what our purpose is, what our why is, with what we do for a living, for what we do for, we end up doing it because it makes us happy, and making the living is the consequence of it, right? That's the result. That's like the side effect of doing what you love to do because you're aligned with that, and that's what your why is. And of course, you got to be good at it, right? If you're terrible at kicking stones, you never kick one. If you try to, you have bad aim. You're not going to do well. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, I love that whole idea.
It's funny. When I talked to my 7-year-old, I said, "So what do you want to be when you grow up?" Just in the course of conversation, he said, "Dad, I want to be a firefighter." Oh, and a pilot. I was like, "Oh, and I'm going to be a veterinarian." Huh? We're still talking about the same life, right? And Dad, I'm also going to be a businessman. Really? So we're now on 4 careers. And the conviction with which he says it is amazing. I think we could all serve from some point of view to be able to live with that level of passion and intention, right? Gosh,
Yeah.
then it's all joy, and you don't
Yeah.
see the hardship because you're getting where you want to go, right?
That's right. Yes, and it's that. What is that analogy we've used? It's having that beginner's mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Your kids they're just the concept. The world is so big to them, and as we get older, the world seems to shrink in our mind.
And that turns into fixed mindset as we get older. So it's like the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. And this is all kind of revolves around that. And it actually, as an entrepreneur, if some folks are on here, they're entrepreneurs, keep that desire and your dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Your dreams are your asset.
Yeah.
Nobody can take that away from you. No one.
Only
it's
you.
The outside that may, damper that a little bit, but that's the outside. Mm-hmm. You have control of that. So your dreams are the most asset. Your dreams and your desires, that is the passion. So that's why I love, for the, your child there, that's it. That's that fire. That's a desire. That's the dream. And we as adults need to tap into that more often.
Yeah. Agreed. Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Well, thank you so much. Again, it's nice revisiting some of the things that I've thought before and just hadn't connected the dots in the same way. I appreciate everyone in the chat and comments for all your ideas and kind of helping shape this conversation, and the two of you. Thank you for the time.
Oh, thank you for having us. Thank everyone for your comments. That was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you all sharing so much. Over the course of the next week or so, we'll be sharing some of these clips. So if you would like to come back and see these video clips with Sherri and Lou, and we'll also be putting them out on YouTube and also an audio podcast, so you'll be able to listen to this as well. So if you weren't able to get through all of it or weren't able to see some of it, you can listen and watch the rest of it in the coming week. So thank you so much for the time.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.